Hello. So today I'm going to be live on why the cold can make you feel pain more. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes, let everyone filter in, and then we will get going. Wait for a couple more people and then we will get started. Sorry, it's a little bit dark in here. I might try and move the light closer. That might be ever so slightly better. Don't have the best lighting when I'm at home. Okay. Fab. So give it another, I think, minute. I hope everyone's had a good day. Mine has been very busy, but very good. Can't complain. I'm actually home early enough to do my live at home. Normally I always do it at work. So yeah, nice to have a slightly early finish today. It is 8:32, so let's get going. Let me know if you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up in the chat. I'll make sure to try and speak clearly. So, pain. I see a lot of people in the winter, and particularly when the weather changes. So this is what I noticed last week, actually. Obviously, you guys would all had, I say you guys because I was actually on holiday at the time in 30-degree heat in Vietnam, but those that were in the UK apparently had a very lovely first 2 weeks of October, and it was very warm. And I felt like the day that I came back from holiday, the weather suddenly changed and it was like 2-3 degrees and it was freezing. And my clients certainly noticed a big difference with the temperature changes. And so many people that week came in and said, oh, it's so much colder than it was before. My joints are really aching. This hurts. Some of them have pieces of metal work in them from different operations that they've had, and they're really aching. It's the cold weather, and they were all suggesting themselves that it was the cold weather that was making it worse. And I said, yeah, that can happen. But I thought actually this is going to be a really interesting live to do, because it sounds like quite a few people attribute increase in pain levels to the cold weather. And so I thought I'm going to do some research on it myself. I know a little bit about it, but I'm sure there's loads more to learn. So it was quite a good topic to do a bit of research on for me as well, so I can help educate you guys and educate my patients on why having being cold can increase your pain. And your body and brain is very complex, because pain isn't a real kind of measured experience, because pain can be your body's response to damage or potential damage, or if your body thinks it's going to get damaged, it will cause pain even though you haven't got any damage. So pain is very complex, is the first thing that I'll say, which I've said before, and we actually don't know much about pain. We're still learning, so it's a constant learning curve when it comes to pain and the brain and what we know. So the first way in which we can get pain increased through the cold weather is through vasoconstriction. So we have vasoconstriction and we have vasodilation. They're two opposite things. Vasoconstriction is when your veins contract, so they constrict, when you are cold, and dilation is the opposite. So vasodilation is when your veins come to the surface, they relax, and they're doing that to try and release heat from the skin, generally to cool you down. But there's this vasoconstriction, which refers to the narrowing of the blood vessels. When the temperature drops, particularly in our extremities and our fingers and our toes, our extremities do that to minimise heat loss from those areas. They don't want the heat to go, so they keep it in. The other reason that your body does that naturally is that it wants to keep your core temperature high, because your brain goes, cool, all the important stuff is here. Lungs, heart, liver, kidneys, stomach, all that good stuff, it's all here. So if we pull the blood away from fingers and toes, then they're not as important. We need the organs to be well perfused with blood in order for them to work. So as a result of that vasorestriction, that can then cause an increase in pain, because blood brings with it all of the things that are good for healing. So it brings with it oxygen. It helps to flush out any carbon dioxide, lactic acid that's sitting in an area as well. So when we've got that constriction, it's unable to do that. And vasodilation helps to reduce pain. So, for example, things like massage, acupuncture, joint mobilizations, exercise, they're all forms of therapies. They cause vasodilation, which helps to reduce people's pain. But in the cold weather, we get the opposite, it's vasoconstriction. And that narrowing of the blood vessels, particularly in our extremities, is how we also get frostbite. So my partner was away with the military in Norway on a military exercise a couple of years ago. He ended up getting hypothermia because he slept in the snow overnight. And the next day he nearly lost his finger. This is not me swearing you, this is the finger that he nearly lost. And the reason for that was he had such tight vasoconstriction in his hands and in his feet, because his body was trying to keep his core temperature warm to keep him alive, that then he ended up without enough blood supply in his finger. And that's what your body does to basically help keep you alive. It sacrifices other parts of it. His finger was fine in the end, so it was all good, in case you were wondering. But that's what ends up happening if we get on that real extreme end of cold. And then increased muscle stiffness is something that we get in the cold as well. Cold temperatures can cause muscles to really tighten up and they become much less flexible. And that decrease in, increased stiffness can then result in additional stress on joints, and that leads to discomfort, because at the end of the day, our muscles help to support our joints. So if we don't have enough support in those joints because the muscles aren't able to work as well as normal, then that's going to cause a bit of pain as well. And the really interesting thing that I found was I did a season working at Wasps Rugby Club. I finished the season, that was in the UK, so we went through cold and warm temperatures like we would in a normal year, and some very cold temperatures. And then I went off to Florida and I worked in college American football there. And the differences in soft tissue injuries, particularly muscle tears and strains is mainly what I'm referring to here, was massive. At Wasps, we had quite a few muscle tears. People would be out running about, their calf would go, their hamstring would go, something like that. And then in the college American football, I didn't see really any muscle tears at all. And, one argument for that could be, maybe the strength and conditioning in the programming was really good at the American football and not at Wasps, but actually it was the complete opposite. Wasps had a very good strength and conditioning coach and had very good prehab stuff that they were doing, whereas the college American football players actually, although they had much better facilities, in my opinion, their strength and conditioning training was not adequate and it really was not good enough for what they were doing. So to then see, despite the fact that they've not had as good a training in that area, they're not getting as many muscle strains, I thought this has to be to do with the weather, because in Florida we'd come outside and you'd already be sweating from like 5 seconds outside. And I certainly found that when I was over there the first week or so, I could barely cope in the heat outside in it every day, all day, because you're not used to it, but they become a bit more acclimatized to it. So that's that's our second way. We've got vasoconstriction is our first way. Increased muscle stiffness is the second way by which cold temperatures can increase our pain. The third thing that we also need to consider is inflammation. So the relationship between cold weather and inflammation is very complex, and some studies suggest that cold temperatures might lead to heightened inflammatory response from the body. And this was a research study that was done that was looking at skin inflammation as a result of cold temperature. And so they were looking at if that can happen on the skin, can that happen underneath the surface of the skin as well? So that's something that's still being explored, but it's certainly an interesting one, because I do have, again, this is anecdotal evidence and it's not a research study, but a lot of my clients that are probably a little bit more elderly, maybe that like retired bracket, they often go off to India for a few months a year, or maybe Dubai or Turkey, places like that for a few months at a time, because they don't have, they're not working anymore, they can go where they want. And they say, joints don't hurt when I'm away. But when I'm back here and it's cold, like my joints hurt a lot. And the only real difference they've had is temperature, because their lifestyle hasn't varied. They're staying in a house over there, they've got to do all the normal house responsibilities that they would over here. The only difference is the temperature. And often a lot of them have got inflammatory conditions like arthritis and that kind of thing, where inflammation is going to make them worse, even though it's not a specific inflammatory condition. So I definitely hear a lot that they feel better when they're in their warm country, and they feel worse when they're in the UK and it's cold. The next thing is reduced physical activity. So cold weather often does discourage people from engaging in physical activity. Even if you're just driving in your car, you can see that lots of people aren't walking anymore. In the summer, you do see a lot more people walking. But that lack of exercise can then lead to actually muscle weakness. And if you have muscle weakness, then it's joint stiffness. Because like I said earlier, muscles support joints, and also exercise creates blood flow because it's vasodilation. So if we're not exercising anymore, then that can be something that can cause us more discomfort as well. And often we find that people are discouraged from going outside when it's cold. I do the same thing. It might be a Saturday, Sunday afternoon in the summer. I'll definitely go for a walk. In the winter, oh, it's raining. Yeah, probably won't. And I don't then necessarily replace that activity with something else. Just go, oh, well, I just won't go for a walk today because it's not very nice. You've also got sports that are only played in the summer. I've got lots of patients that play cricket and they don't replace it with a winter sport. So during that time, that can lead to an increased amount of discomfort as well in their joints as a result of that. But on top of that, if we're not exercising regularly anyway, that can lead to joint stiffness. Our bodies are made to be moved. I say it all the time. We're hunter-gatherers. We're not made to just sit at our desk and type all day. We are made to get out and get moving. So that in itself, regardless of the temperature, it can create stiffness. But it just happens that in the winter, we generally move less anyway, if you see what I mean. So that's our fourth mechanism. So our first one is that we have vasoconstriction. Our second one is that we have increased muscle stiffness. Our third is inflammation. And our fourth is reduced activity. Our fifth factor is actually psychological factors. So cold weather can really affect mood and motivation, and you've probably heard of SAD disease, very common in countries that get very little sunlight. So Norway, Sweden, Finland, places like that, where in the winter months, sometimes the sun doesn't really come up. It kind of gets to sort of like a dusky dawn sort of colour, maybe 11, 12 in the afternoon, in the morning, and then it's back to being dark by 2 or 3. So that lack of vitamin D, that lack of sunlight, the confusion in your circadian rhythm because you haven't seen the sun as well, can cause depressive symptoms. And as a result of those depressive symptoms, a lack of motivation can then come about, and that can lead to an increased perception of pain as well. But on top of that, I've said it before as well, if you're getting things like depression, anxiety, your mental health is unfortunately not in a good state, all of those things make you experience pain worse. So if you've got a pain in your knee that in the summer months you describe as a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, in the winter months, that pain is probably going to be a 3 or 4 out of 10 possibly. There's going to be an increase there if your mental health also dips alongside the seasons, combined with all of the other factors that we've already spoken about as well. And the other thing is that if you have got depressive symptoms, that does lead to your motivation dropping with a lot of people. That is one of the symptoms of depression, is being apathetic and not having any motivation. So if you don't have any motivation, the chance of you getting out and getting moving and exercising as well, which are going to be things that will help increase blood flow to your body, which will reduce the pain, again, it's probably not going to happen. So there's other mechanisms like vasoconstriction, increased muscle stiffness, and lack of physical activity kind of play into the psychological factors really well as well, unfortunately. And then we also have sensory changes as well. So exposure to cold temperatures can affect sensory receptors in the skin and tissues, which make pain more noticeable. So what a sensory receptor is basically, if you look at my skin here, I can touch my skin on my hand, and my brain, even if my eyes are shut, even if I touch a surface of something that I haven't seen, my brain knows that I have touched something. I don't have to see that to know that my hand has been touched by something. And that is because we have nerves that supply our skin, which travel to our brain, which relay information. They say to the brain, something has touched it here. So the cold temperature, we've got lots of different nerves is the other thing to say. So you've got nerves that sense hot and cold, nerves that sense sharp and blunt, nerves that sense vibration, things like that. And so our hot and cold nerves, which are our hot receptive nerves, sorry, are the fastest travelling in the human body. Have you ever had it where you've put your hand under the kettle or something stupid, or you've touched steam or something, and your hands move before your brain's even processes its move? You sort of look down and be like, that was hot, my hand's no longer there, that moved really quickly. And it's because the circuit to your brain is so rapid that it moves your hand away before you even realise what's happening. But the same receptors that sense hot and cold, they're the ones that can then make the tissues more sensitive to pain and more noticeable. But again, like I said earlier, pain isn't something that we know loads and loads about, unfortunately. So this is just one of the mechanisms through which we kind of expect that pain can increase with the cold. And that was in quite an interesting study that showed that cold temperatures can alter the sensitivity of sensory receptors, which can potentially lead to an increase in pain in colder temperatures as well. So all of these insights kind of highlight the complex interplay of the physiological and the psychological factors as well that can result in heightened sensitivity during cold weather. And while your individual experience may vary, if you understand all of these different mechanisms and how they play into each other, then it can be very valuable for how you experience pain, and it can help you manage your pain much better as well. Because if you think, it's very easy to get into this cycle of, well, I feel pain, so therefore I'm going to sit and rest. But actually, if you know, I feel pain, but it is cold outside, and as a result of it being cold outside, I actually haven't done my exercises today or walks this week or whatever it is I'm meant to do, and I know that that's going to increase my blood flow, and I know therefore the vasoconstriction mechanism, which is making me feel pain, is going to go away because I'm going to be exercising. I'm also going to get rid of the increased muscle stiffness part of that too, because I'm going to be using my muscles, and I'm going to be getting rid of the reduced physical activity part of that. All of those things together, and your mental health will probably thank you for getting moving. You can target a lot of these perceptions of pain related to cold just by moving, is what I'm trying to say with that. So I think that's something that if you take away nothing else from this, is that in cold weather, try and move, and that's actually going to help with a lot of the mechanisms. But just to cover the mechanisms again, we've got vasoconstriction because our veins narrow, our blood vessels narrow to restrict blood flow to our peripheries in particular. We have increased muscle stiffness, we've got inflammation, reduced physical activity, and then we've got psychological factors and sensory changes that all play into this as well. If you've got any questions, I'll give you a couple of minutes to ask them now, and if not, then I will jump off. So I'll give you a minute or so to ask anything you want to ask. And if you have been suffering from any pain, whether you think that's related to the cold or not related to the cold, or maybe the cold made you think, oh, this is actually worse than I thought, please feel free to drop a message you can drop a comment under this post, or you can message me anytime, or you can message the clinic as well. We'll always get back to you on how we can help you. I don't think anyone's got any questions, but like I said, if you do, you might think of something after this live, just pop it on here and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Have a lovely evening. Bye.